Talk Radio.
Me chiamo Afuraitkait Neye Ujira da me dende Ujirafo Kwesi Radnahem Pita Akan Aquamumain Amaruka STP Mu Ojirafo Ojira Mine Mu. Greetings to all Afuraitkait people, many African black people. Today is Ojira Day, Purification Day. My name is Ojirafo Kwesi Radnahem Pita Akan, Ojirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America, within Ojira-Mai, the purified nation of Afuraitkait people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you for tuning in once again to the broadcast. We are opening up the chat room right now. We're going to do a little reboot to make sure that comes up. For the individuals who are new to the broadcast, we typically have 3 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We had to postpone yesterday's and Wednesdays because of travel schedule and so forth. So we typically have 3 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have Akan Ancestral, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion on Joda on Monday nights, where we focus specifically on the Akan expression of ancestral religion because of the misinformation that has been propagated from individuals on the continent who have been infected with white culture and have a false presentation of ancestral culture, as well as people in the Western Hemisphere who've been infected by the whites in our spring as well. So we deal specifically with the Akan expression on Monday nights on Joda, Akan Ancestral, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion, showing our direct descent from ancient Khanit migrating to West Afuraka, Afuraitkait a couple of thousand years ago, maintaining the Khanit, Nubian or Khanit Empire, the Empire of Ghana, migrating further south towards the forest belt about 1,000 years ago to continue the Akanat or Akan civilization. And then a few hundred years after that, some of our people were forced in the Western Hemisphere during the Musu Oketia, the Great Diversity Enslavement era. And this is how we ended up as Akan people from ancient Khanit, ancient Nubia to West Afuraka, Afuraitkait, to the Western Hemisphere. So we show that direct genetic lineage, that direct ritual connection, that direct ancestral connection, that transcarnational inheritance. And this is how we brought the Akan religion into the Western Hemisphere. So we go into detail about cosmology, the nature of the Abosom, the deities, the nature of the Nananom, Odumafo, the ancestral spirit, or spiritually cultivated, the nature of the Great Mother and the Great Father, Nyamewa, and Nyame, the Supreme Being, Amenet and Amen, the nature of Nyonkumpon and Nyonkuntong, the Creator and Creatress, Ra and Riot, their relationship to us, and their relationship as Creator and Creatress, as grandchildren of the Supreme Being, Amenet and Amen, Nyamewa, Nyame, and so forth. So we deal with a number of different things on our Kampo Narason. On Wednesday nights, we have Ekwa Marketplace, where we deal with Afuraitkait businesses, organizations, and institutions that are serving our community in a positive capacity, our people, but also maintain their ancestral religious values in the process. So we've had a number of individuals come onto the show. We'll have more coming on, dealing with our Okom Economic Development Model approach. We have published the Okom Economic Development Model, which is an economic development model rooted in our ancestral religious values. So when you look on our page, the Okom Economic Development Model page, we'll put that link in the chat room real quick. You'll see that we published that model. You can download that for free, of course. We did a 4-part series on that on Blog Talk. You can download that series and a couple of other broadcasts. And then you'll see the list of businesses, organizations, and institutions that have come onto our show, sat with us for a couple of hours and talked about their businesses. That list is an ever-growing list. Part of the Okom Economic Development Model is to starve the beast and feed the pride. That is a strategy, of course, that we implement within the model. So we make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds we would have wasted with the whites in our spring, and then we starve the beast and feed the pride. We reallocate those funds away from those white businesses and direct them to the business, organization, or institution of the week. We are targeting one Afuraitkait business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks, and we started that process back in February. So as a community, we ask people to support the business, organization, or institution of the week for optimal capital infusion. So when you starve the beast and feed the pride, you take $10 or $15 away from the white businesses like CVS or 7-Eleven or Walmart or whatever business you would have wasted that $10 or $15 with during the course of a week, and you reallocate it, starve that white beast and feed the pride. That's an infusion of $10 or $15 to black business. When thousands of our people do that in the course of 1 week, that's an infusion of $10,000 to $15,000 of capital into a black business from the black community in the course of 1 week, and that allows the business to expand higher within the community, expand their products and services to us, and therefore we can remove our business from our absolute enemies, the whites and their offspring, and direct it to our people. If we don't engage that process by default, we're leaving that $15,000+ in the hands of our absolute enemies, the whites and their offspring, whether they be white Americans, white Europeans, white Hindus, white Arabs, white Asians, white Hispanics, white Latinos, white pseudo-Native Americans, white Asians, and so forth. No matter who they are, non-Afurakani, non-Afuraitkait, non-African, non-black people are the enemies of our people without exception. And when we do not starve the beast and feed the pride by default, we are leaving the money in the hands of our enemies so that they can expand their businesses, serve their families, and starve our people in the same process. That's what we're doing at that point, is financing our own oppression. So we must starve the beast and feed the pride on a consistent basis. And this is why we target one business, so there's an optimal capital infusion that business can receive funds in a lump sum, so to speak, so that they can really do some things with that infusion. So you'll see that list of businesses on Calm Economic Development Model page. Before we get into tonight's show, we also have a couple of announcements. This weekend, December 12th, in Durham, North Carolina, we will be presenting on our publication, Hoodoo People. We will be talking about Hoodoo, the Akan Ancestral Religion, born of the blood circles of Afuraitkait, African people in North America. So we look forward to returning to Durham this weekend, December 12th. It will be at the Vegan Flavor Cafe, and the sister Ma'al Amen, who's been on the show before, she's the one who convened the head Ma'al call, the Soul Psychic Fair, and we went there back in July. As a matter of fact, in Durham, North Carolina, to present there as well. She's published What's in Your Womb, dealing with holistic wellness and healing from an Afuraitkait perspective. She's been on the show a couple of times. Her and her husband own the Vegan Flavor Cafe, which is just opened like a couple of months ago. So it's a full-service vegan restaurant, culturally grounded, culturally based. So please patronize that business on a regular basis. Vegan Flavor Cafe. That's where we'll be having our presentation this weekend in Minnesota, Saturday, December 12th. We'll be speaking at 7 p.m. at the Vegan Flavor Cafe. So you'll see the event notification on Facebook as well as our NING site. So please share that information. Of course, it's a free event. And of course, we endeavor to give away at least one copy of our book, Hoodoo People, to everyone who attends the event. Give away a free copy of the book, and we've been able to do that at all of the events that we have had in different cities. We were just in Hartford, Connecticut, and Rochester, New York, just outside of Rochester, New York, last weekend. And prior to that, the week before that, we were in Atlanta. And prior to that, we were in D.C. on the 15th. And prior to that, we were in Montgomery, Alabama. And prior to that, we were in D.C., of course, for our Odu-mani, Hoodoo Nation Festival back in October. So since that time in October, almost on a weekly basis, we've been in different cities doing presentations on different subjects, on different publications. So this is coming up here. And also on December 22nd, in Washington, D.C. We will have our next event in Washington, D.C., and we'll be sending out a notification for that. December 22nd is actually the first full day of the MAYN, or the winter solstice, and it's actually on a Tuesday night. So we're going to have an event on that night. The winter solstice actually starts at 11:48 p.m. Monday night on December 21st. So we're going to have the event on Benada Tuesday night, Ojira Day, Ojira Da. At the time frame that we would normally, around the time frame we would normally be having our broadcast, but we're going to have our event on that night. So that's December 22nd in Washington, D.C. We will be sending out a notification for that. All right, so if anybody has any, and of course, if you have any questions or comments on the phone line, of course, you hit the number 1. If you have any questions or comments you'd like to interact in the chat room, simply you must log in as a user in the chat room in order to interact in the chat room. If you don't have a username, you can sign up for one quickly in BlogTalk. So for tonight, Benada Tuesdays, we have Ojira. Jira means purification. In the Akan language, it also means a celebration of purification. So, for example, the Akan New Year is typically called Ojira, which is a time for purification that takes place around. Here in North America, we have our 7-day New Year celebration, our Obrajira celebration, 6 days leading up to the autumn or Atemet fall equinox, and then the 7th day is the first full day of the equinox. That is our New Year's Day. This year was September 23rd, the first full day of the year 13,016. And so Jira means purification and a celebration of purification. Of course, the Akan language is directly descendant of ancient Khanit and Kemet. So when you look at the language of ancient Kemet, you'll see that Jira means purification in the Medutu, the hieroglyphs, and Jira also means a celebration of purification. Same term. So we're talking about purification on this particular show, purifying the culture, cosmology, language, ritual practices, the understanding of that, and the incorporation of that. There's a great deal of misinformation being propagated by not only individuals in the Western Hemisphere, but also individuals on the continent who have been infected by white culture, white pseudo-philosophy, white pseudo-religion, Christianity, Islam, and so forth, and just white culture in general. Those infections have creeped into the presentation of the culture. Sometimes they've been creeping in intergenerationally for over 100+ years. So when you see individuals talking about the culture and putting forward certain philosophies and so forth, you have a corruption that has infected their presentation of the culture that's not always readily apparent. So what we deal with is the purification of the culture. Jira means purification. When we talk about Nanasom, Afuraitkait Ancestral Religion, which is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance, these are the expansive and contractive poles of Nanasom or Afuraitkait, African Ancestral Religion. The expression of religion is the ritual incorporation of law. Through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. Through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions so that we can realign ourselves with divine order. So that is the impression of order, while law is the expression of order. The incorporation of law is the expression, that rejection of disorder is the impression. So the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion, Nanasom, is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. So we're talking about aligning our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order every moment of every day. That is our responsibility as Afuraitkait people, as adults. So we engage that process ritually. That's what Nanasom or ancestral religion is, no matter what expression it takes amongst our people, wherever we are in the world. Ojira, or purification, operationalizes Nanasom. Jira, purification, operationalizes our practice of ritually incorporating law and ritually restoring balance. So this is what we deal with on ODWIRA, and we deal with texts from ancient Khanit and Khanit, as well as orature, oral literature, and ritual practices and understanding of cosmology from our ritual practices on the continent, as well as in the Western Hemisphere, as we brought our ancestral traditions in our blood circles transcarnationally through successive reincarnations into the Western Hemisphere, maintained our ancestral religion. So tonight, the show is dealing with Odumafo, Hoodoo-man, Hoodoo-woman, Akan, priests and priestesses in Hoodoo, in North America. Very often you will find misinformation being propagated about Hoodoo and what it really is. Of course, we published our book, Hoodoo People, Akan, Custodians of Hoodoo from Ancient Hoodoo Ndunu Land, Khanit, Nubia, proving that the term Hoodoo comes from the Akan language, meaning Undu, meaning medicine, root work, and so forth, but also meaning conjure. We also published our article, Kanche, which is the term literally that we use in the Akan language to invoke the spirits of the Abosom, Kanche. That's what Kanche means, to utter incantations to invoke the spirits and evoke the ancestral spirits. The term Kanche is where the whites and their offspring assumed that we were saying conjure, kanje, or conjure. So Undu and Kanche in the Akan language is where you get Hoodoo and conjure in North America, directly describing in our language our ritual practices in the Akan language. Of course, we show that these terms exist in the language of ancient Khanit and Nubia as well, with the exact same meaning. So these are terms that we have been using to describe our ritual practices for thousands of years, unbroken from ancient Khanit, Nubia to the West Afuraka, Afuraitkait, amongst the Akan and Ghana and Ivory Coast, but also into America, still using the exact same terms, Hoodoo and Kanche, that you will find in the hieroglyphic dictionaries, the Medutu, and so forth. We never stop speaking these terms. So we prove that in our publication. But going even further, some people will say that there are no priests and priestesses in Hoodoo, and Hoodoo is different from Vodou. Of course, Hoodoo is the Akan tradition in North America. We've proven that. Vodou is the Fawn and Ebe tradition in North America. Sometimes people assume that these are the exact same tradition, which they are not. Vodou is its own tradition. It is the Fawn and Ebe people's tradition. The Vodou are the deities in Fawn and Ebe culture, just like Abosom are the deities in the Akan culture, and Orisha are the deities in the Yoruba culture. But some people will say, well, Vodou is a religion, or the Yoruba tradition is a religion, but Hoodoo is just African-American folk magic. You just do whatever you want to do. There's no structure. There's no protocol. There's no hierarchy. There are no deities. People dealing with elemental spirits, and sometimes, of course, dealing with ancestral spirits, and that's all it really is. And it's just a hodgepodge of different things coming from Europe and so-called Native Americans and Africa, and we just throw things together and do whatever. Of course, that is totally 100% false. There are people who try to approach Hoodoo in that fashion because they don't know really what it is. They either have fallen away from that, or they've been engaged with the whites and their offspring on some level and have corrupted their own ancestral practice. So we separate these things out. We sift these things out and show who's who and what's what and what's really going on. When we talk about Hoodoo from the real sense, this is the Akan religion that was brought to North America. We brought that tradition. We not only brought the name Hoodoo coming from the Akan term Undu, we brought Kanche coming from that Akan term and later pronounced Kanche or Kanja, but we also brought Odum-sinfo, which is a term for ritual specialists dealing with root medicine, root work, and so forth. Odu-yefo, ye means to work or to act in Akan, so Odu-yefo are the Odu-ye people, the ones who work. Ye, Undu, medicine from roots, trees, stalks, branches, and so forth. So they are the root medicine, root working people. Undu-yefo, or Odu-yefo. The Odum-sinfo, Unsin is talking about stumps of trees for medicine and so forth. The Odum-sinfo are the ones who engage trunks well as stalks and plants and roots and so forth, to procure that medicine, extract that medicine, and engage the healing process. So Odun-sin-fo or Odun-sini-fo is literally a root doctor, root medicine work. So we have these two different terms. But then we also have the term Odumafo, talking about medicine, ndu, and then ma means to give or to apply. So those people who apply ma or give ma, ndu or ndru, medicine. Medicine giving people, medicine working people. And that medicine ndu is from the ndua or ndria, from trees, roots, stalks, and so forth. So it's still the root medicine giving people, the Oduma people. Now, first we have to look in the Akan language. Odumafo, the suffix fo, is a suffix in Akan dealing with people as in a group of people of plurality. So, for example, you have the term Akan. When you say Akan people, you say Akan fo, or for, the diphthong, depending on the dialect. Akan fo or Akan for means the group of people for who are Akan. Singular would be Akan ni, which is one Akan person. Akan ni, one Akan person. Akan fo, a plurality fo of Akan people. Now, typically, fo is a suffix, but sometimes fo can be used as a designating a plural of people without being a suffix. Fo meaning people or group. That's important because fo meaning people or group, we understand that linguistically the F and the P interchanges in our languages. So when you look in ancient Khanit, you'll find the interchange of the P and F, and you'll see that in Akan, talking about a plurality of people or a group of people, you find pa in ancient Khanit, meaning a plurality of people. Just like you have pe or pe in ancient Khanit, meaning house, and then you have fie in Akan, meaning house or home. The interchange of the P and the F. Pe becomes fie in Akan. Pa in ancient Khanit, meaning group of people, becomes fa in Akan, meaning group of people. And then, of course, in English, that becomes folk, like folks or folk, like Akan folk or black folk and so forth. This goes back to pa in ancient Khanit, meaning a group of people. In Akan, we maintain it as folk. So you have Akan fo, Akan people. Akan ni, Akan person. Same. Oduma-fo, which is a group of people, fo, who are Oduma. They apply or give ma medicine from roots, trees, branches, stalks, and so forth. Ndu. So Odumafo are the medicine-giving people. Now, when you look at the singular, what the singular would be technically in the language, just like you have Akani, an Akan person singular, Akan fo, Akan people, where you have Obi-bri ni. Obi-bri means one Obi who is black. Bri or Bibri ni is one black person. This is what we call black people in the Akan language. Ebibri fo is the group of people, fo, who are Ebibri black. Ebibri fo is black people. Obibri ni is a black person. Akan ni is an Akan person. Akan fo is a group of people called Akan. Oduma-fo are the group of people fo who are Oduma. Now, technically, a singular will be Oduma-ni. Singular, Oduma-fo, plural. In English, that would sound like Oduma-fo. Oduma-folks. Hoodoo-man-fo. Hoodoo-mani, meaning a hoodoo-man or hoodoo-woman, singular. Hoodoo-man-fo or Oduma-fo is the hoodoo-man or hoodoo-woman, plural. Even in the language in English, when we say hoodoo-man and hoodoo-woman, what we're really saying is the ancient Akan term, Oduma, Odumafo, Oduma-folks, Oduma people, Hoodoo-man people, Hoodoo-man people, Hoodoo-woman people, and so forth. It's talking about the people who give medicine root work, and so forth. So we have the same term. When we say Hoodoo man and Hoodoo woman in English, we're just simply repeating Odu-mani and Odumafo, the priests and priestesses, the healers and healeresses within Undu or Hoodoo, within the Akan tradition. So even linguistically, we've always had a class of people who engage the Unduma. They go and extract medicine from roots, trees, branches, and so forth, but they also engage Kanche, Ka meaning to speak, utter incantations, Che meaning to bring or are coming forth. So through the Ka, the uttering of the incantations, the bringing or coming forth of the Abosum, the forces of nature, of the spirits, the ancestral spirits, and so forth. So we have people who engage Kanche, we have people who engage Undu, which is conjure, coming down, becoming heavy with the spirit, becoming possessed by the spirit, and so forth. That's what we're talking about. So in the language itself, and of course in the ritual practice, we have all of these various elements. We have the name of a specific class of healers and healeresses, which is really a priest class, priestess class. We have been using the name all along, Hoodoo-ma, Hoodoo woman, and didn't know we were saying Odumafo, Odu-mani, talking about this specific class of healers and healeresses. Yet at the same time, we did know, because we called them in English root doctors, root workers, and so forth, root medicine people, root men, root women, and all along we were utilizing the exact same title. Now, we're going to go to some information in a specific text, and one of the books that we recommend dealing with Hoodoo from a true historical perspective and talking about the old black belt tradition of Hoodoo is the book called Mojo Working by Dr. Katrina Hazard. And in fact, she was able to come out to our Hoodoo Mind, Hoodoo Nation Festival back in October here in Washington, D.C., and we were very grateful for her to be able to make her presence felt there. But the book, Mojo Working, published a couple of years ago. You can get it on, and we're just pulling that information up, you can get it on Google Books. You can get it on different places on the website. You can get the ebook version. You can also get the softcover version as well. So she's talking about the difference between real Hoodoo and the foundations of Hoodoo, certain things coming into being and developing since enslavement, and how we maintain our basic practices throughout enslavement into the quote-unquote 19th and 20th and quote-unquote 21st centuries and so forth, and also showing how the whites and their offspring began to try to invade the culture and start coming up with all these little hoodoo potions and marketeering and all this nonsense and selling products that really have nothing to do with our culture and trying to co-opt the culture, trying to infuse their perverse culture into hoodoo and trying to, turn it into something it's really not. So she's making a distinction between old black belt nation hoodoo, plantation hoodoo, and so forth, and the marketeering quote-unquote hoodoo that you get from these white so-called Jews and others who are manufacturing nonsensical products and trying to rob our people of our culture. So when we get back to our sources, of course, none of the deities or ancestral spirits have ever or will ever deal with any of the whites and their offspring on any level. It is cosmologically and spiritually impossible for them to practice any ancestral religion because the deities do not deal with them at all. And the foundation of ancestral religious practice is Akan and Nkom, spirit possession and spirit communication, which they cannot affect on any level, dealing with actual deities of creation or the ancestresses and ancestors of Afuraka, Afuraitkait. So we just want to scroll through this specific section we wanted to get to. Pull this up real quick, just to give you a few definitions we want to give. And it looks like we're going to have to put this in a different format so we can see it better. All right. So when you look in the glossary of the book, and it's a nice glossary because it's a lot of the different terms that you may have heard about growing up or even now. She identifies those terms and gives proper definitions for these different things. So for example, of course, just the colloquial term like doctor, usually meaning root doctor, conjure, C-O-N-J-A, conjure. Wife and offspring would say conjure, another name for the Hoodoo tradition, or a conjurer, a root worker, but of course we've dealt with that. But there's a section that we want to get to. So let me just scroll down to it. I want to find that specific page for you. Of course, the haint, we talked about haints and haint blue and so forth, the haint or haunt, another name for supernatural beings. Very often they're dealing with this kind of wayward spirits, but some can be, natural ancestral spirits as well. The haint blue, talking about a deep, rich sky blue color, tells certain kinds of negative haint spirits and so forth. We talked about haint coming from hinti in Akan, talking about to rouse up. So some spirits are roused up because they're angry, but some are roused up because they're being called upon to possess and communicate with our people and so forth. So hinti becomes hint in North America, quinti or hinti in Suriname. We did a whole broadcast on that. All right, so we just want to scroll down once again. We're looking for a specific piece right here. Okay, so first, in the English, of course, you see she has the term seer. And these things are relevant. We show the relevance. Seer being defined in the glossary. When people just use that colloquially in Hoodoo, a seer is a root worker with power to predict the future or to see unrevealed phenomena, sometimes incorrectly referred to as psychic. This title, almost always urban, updates and legitimizes root workers who use it to some people. So they start using the term psychics, but in the past, people would simply say a seer. And then, of course, the term psychic, the term is most frequently used by non-African Americans who practice other traditions such as palm reading and all of that. All right. Spiritualist is another title that's used colloquially, a title adopted by some old tradition root workers who may be closely associated with the spiritualist church. The title is most often used by palm readers and crystal ball and tarot card readers and all of that, and may or may not have anything to do with old tradition Hoodoo. So sometimes you'll hear people use spiritualist. You have to make a determination between whether or not they're talking about a spiritualist or a holiness church, and they're talking about that. If they're talking about some New Age nonsense, or if they're just using the term generally, talking about someone who's engaged in spiritual practice, ritual practice, and they're a spiritualist, healer, healeress, and so forth. A swamper, an old tradition black belt conjurer or root worker who goes out and harvests his or her own plants, roots, and supplies. So we're not talking about people who, go to a botanica or go to a so-called a hoodoo curio, little white-owned shop where they have little hot foot powder and all kinds of potions and nonsense, and purchasing products from the whites and their offspring so that we can practice our ancestral religion. Talking about a swamper, someone who goes out into the swamps, goes out into the forest and so forth, harvests his or her own plants, roots, and supplies. That's directly related to the Odumafo, the one who goes out into the forest, procures the plant life as well as mineral life for the healing of the people. I'll go next. Scroll down real quick. So we have a couple of things here. Now, the term two-head, an old tradition black belt Hoodoo name for a conjurer, root doctor, root worker, or Hoodoo practitioner. The term refers to the belief that the root worker can see into two worlds, the corporeal world of everyday existence and the invisible spirit world. Now, some people are just, They can get some medicine. They can tell you, kind of like a physician or a naturopathic physician. You go to some, root worker, root doctor, and so forth. You're sick. You have a problem. They're like, all right, well, this is what you can do. Here's a specific plant that can heal you from that. This is what we've dealt with for, years and years and years. This is what you need to do to heal this issue. So that's one thing. But then you have someone who can do that and show you what you need to heal. But then at the same time, they're a seer. At the same time, they can communicate with the ancestresses and ancestors. At the same time, they can communicate with the abosom. They can see what's taking shape and formulating within your life. They can see what's happening in your life even though you haven't told them anything. They can do that kind of divination. So they're not just giving you some medicine, some specific root medicine to heal a specific issue, but they can also see beyond the physical. They can perceive beyond the physical. They can attune to the forces in nature and give you not only information about what's taking place, but they can also prescribe for you ritual practices so you can realign with the abosom that govern you and align with your Nhoma and Odumafo so you can bring resolution to conflict within your life and avoid conflict in the future and resolve previous issues as well. So they will call them a two-head doctor. They can give you the medicine, they can see what's going on, but they can also prescribe the healing ritually and spiritually through invocation and evocation. So why would you utilize that terminology? If someone has that capacity, in English you say a two-head because they have the capacity to do both. But in reality, you're talking about a form of priest or priestess. These are different classes of priests and priestesses in the tradition, whether it's a swamper, a seer, two-head, and so forth, root worker, root doctor, and so forth. These are different classes of priesthood and priestesshood. These are different classes of Odumafo, Oduma people, Oduma-folks, Odu-mani, Odu-woman-folks, and so forth. She goes further into another piece, the walking board, a traditional divination device used by African American conjurers working in the old black belt tradition. This device was used on plantations throughout the Deep South. A small bottle was attached to a string or cord about 2 feet long. The bottle was then allowed to swing freely like a pendulum. This device was also used to locate conjure packets or negative mojos that had been buried near the home of or in the potential pathway of an individual. So, you have someone creating a divinatory instrument to attune to what's going on, to find out where somebody may have buried some negative medicine trying to take you out or cause you some problems. You use that walking board to find that out, just like a metal detector or, something like that. At the same time, use like a pendulum. When people talk about pendulums and using pendulums to heal and detect negative energy in the room, and the pendulum starts to swing a little bit wildly, out of order, and so forth, they can pick up on this. These are divinatory practices that we brought in our blood circles from the continent that we still use today. When you look at this walking board and it's talking about tying a bottle, then they walk, tied to a string or a cord, and then they walk and it becomes like a pendulum, but it starts pulling in a specific direction and so forth. When you look in the Akan tradition, and we talked about last week, Hoodoo, which is or fue means to look, and fue means to look, meaning examination, and mu, or mu means to look within, so you're looking intensely within. That means investigation, critical examination. When you see the adekra symbol, dria, the dria is a stick. Du or dua, dria is a stick. And dria, the actual adekra symbol, is a stick. It's a specific kind of stick. What kind of stick? A mu stick. A stick that you use to mu, to look look within. You utilize the stick to walk around, and for example, if somebody's looking for, trying to find out where a water source is, it's underground, they're using the stick, and the stick begins to bend towards where the water source is, and people dig in that area, and they dig deep down, and to create a well, and then they hit, a spring of water. So it's a Shweshwemdria or Fwefwemdria, that is examination rod, utilizing a stick for divinatory purposes, not just finding water, but also detecting, just like a pendulum in a sense, detecting if there are negative spirits in the area, in the region. If somebody is planting some negative medicine or whatever it is, this particular Fwefwemdria, this stick, this dria, that is used to examine or search, a searching rod, searching stick, and so forth, is dealing with finding things physically in nature, but also finding the kind of energy that's being projected by certain kinds of ancestral spirits. There's a walking boy, divinatory instrument that's used in North America. We use it on plantations, and afterwards, tying that bottle to a string or a cord, letting it swing so it can be pulled in one direction or the other. It's a continuation of one of our forms of divinatory practice. Where do these divinatory practices come from, and who are they given to? They're given to people who came into the world assigned to specific abosom and having a specific function to serve the community in that capacity, to serve as a vessel of the abosom for the community, for the family, and for the community. When your function is to serve as a vessel through whom the abosom can speak, the abosom can operate through possession, the abosom can operate through divination and so forth, that is the function of a priest or a priest. So whenever somebody is engaged in that kind of divination, somebody is engaged in that kind of healing on that level, for example, as a two-head doctor, so forth, a two-head root doctor and so forth, that simply means that they came into the world with that specific function. Everybody doesn't have that function. Everybody in our community, of course, is assigned abosom before they come into the world, assigned to specific ancestors in Samanfo, in Samanfo, before they come into the world, and they utilize those things for their benefit, to execute their function and for the benefit of their children and so forth. But then you have other people who, of course, are assigned to abosom, just like everybody else, but their function with regard to their assignment is not just to utilize that energy to align themselves and their family on a consistent basis. Their assignment is they have a regulatory function in creation. It's like certain glands in your body have regulatory functions. The pituitary gland is a master gland. It secretes hormones, which are directives that regulate the functions of other glands in your body. The same thing with the pineal gland through its hormonal secretion. It sends out directives to regulate the functions of other glands. Now, whereas other glands just have a specific function that they execute in the body, and you have other kinds of glands that are regulatory in their function. Their role is to regulate others. They're supervisors, they're supervisory, they're managerial in that regard, and they're maintaining and regulating the activities of the other glands, and that is their role, to coordinate activity. So, priests and priestesses have a regulatory function within the community, within the Afuraitkait community. So that's their divine function. Everybody is connected to specific abosom, but the manner in which you interact with them and how you utilize that energy is based on your function. So that's the difference. So that the difference between a priest and priestess is simply the specific pact that they have made with Nyame and the abosom on how they are to function in the world. So you have people who receive a divination system or maintain a divination system from their Nsamanfo and from the abosom. What you have is priesthood and priestesshood manifest. This notion that there are no priests and priestesses in Hoodoo is nonsense. We even not only have the functions of that, and we're just talking about that now with the divination, as well as the healing in and of itself. We not only have the function and people fulfilling that function intergenerationally ever since we've been here, and everybody knows somebody in the family and knows about somebody in the family who engaged that function. They had that clairvoyance, clairaudience. People go to them to learn about what's taking place. And they can help avoid negative, so-called obstacles and so forth. So not only do we have that in the living culture functionally, but even in the names that we utilize, Odu-mani and Odu-woman, that's Oduma, Odu-mani, Oduma-folks, and so forth, as we talked. So, okay, we have a question in the chat room, just online rather. I'm going to scroll through the chat room real quick to make sure we didn't miss anything in the chat room first. And if you have a question or a comment on the phone line, hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. If you're in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact in the chat. Okay, so on the phone line, number 5808, you had a question or a comment?
Yes, Michio. The question is, how does one know if they're called to be a priest or priestess? Are there any signs or messages that they get that they know to alert them that they're to be a priest or priestess, and at what point in their lives? Is it something that they just know from childhood, or is it something that they discover upon in adulthood? Come across my only reference really is the Yoruba Ifa tradition. People that I've known who, once they took on that particular religion, they called themselves a priest of this or a priestess of that. But I've always wondered, what makes them that? How does one know that they are actually called to be a priest and take on the functions, of a priest in their families and communities?
Well, now, the key, of course, is when we come into the womb, of course, that is already wired within us. Now, if we have a culture, then, the cultural mechanisms will be in place to be able to identify that,
right.
We have, the child came into the womb and came into the world to be a priest or a priest. If we have a culture in place, if we don't have a culture in place, then it's a different route. But say, for example,
right.
And people do things differently. So, for example, because of certain structures put in place, certain groups will simply, it's either before the child is born or even after the child is born on the 8th day or a specific designated day. Like in the Yoruba tradition, they'll get a reading on like the 8th or the 9th day to find out, what Odu governs the child and so forth. They put that structure in place. They didn't always have that structure in place. They didn't always have the Ifa divination. They'll talk about a time when they didn't have Ifa, when Ifa was brought to Oyo proper. The king at the time rejected Ifa, and then they suffered a number of different calamities, and then they decided, maybe we need to incorporate this divination system into our lives as Yoruba people. So they didn't always have it, but they have it now. So part of that process is they have they'll do a reading to learn the Odu of the child and what their function is and their destiny. They give them a name and so forth. That's one convention. Other people do different things. Sometimes they will do divination in the 3rd month of the pregnancy of the woman. Like in the Akan tradition, sometimes certain rituals are done in the 3rd month, or they wait until the child is born. If they're Okomfo, Abosomfo in the family, they would take the baby to the shrine of the Abosom and so forth. It depends on the family. It depends on the group. What happens here in North America, and sometimes it's simply they don't go through the divinatory process. Certain Nananom elders would know that this child is marked for that, but they allow the Abosom to make that determination at the proper time. Meaning once the child grows to a certain age, then the Abosom begins to possess the child on a regular basis. And then people start trying to find out what's going on with this child, because they keep getting possessed and there's certain, behavior, even sometimes some erratic behavior. And then the people are forced to take the child to an Okomfo, Abosom, for a priest to say what's going on. And then they tell them, listen, your child is a child of this specific abosom. It is time for them to go through a process of training so they can learn how to ground this energy within them and serve the community in that capacity. The abosom is ready for them to begin to work. So there are different ways that it takes place. Here in America, depending, again, if we have a culture of people practicing hoodoo and juju and voodoo and so forth, some of the older women, sometimes some of the older men, when the baby is born, if they're born with a caul over their face, the quote-unquote veil over their face, that's like an indication that they are a seer. Then there are other things. Sometimes, for example, the women will get that message from the Nhoma. Sometimes the women will get the message from the Nhoma before the Nhoma enters the womb during conception. They will come to the person in a dream, tell them that they're the one that's going to be born, even tell them what their name should be. And then when they get pregnant, they know that spirit has entered the womb. Or sometimes once the conception takes place, they can feel that spirit enter their womb. They know that spirit is there. They begin to have dreams about the child, what their function is. The ancestresses and ancestors will come to them in dreams and so forth. The abosom comes. Sometimes it's not until the baby is born. And the older women, the midwives, and there's a section in the book of Mojo working where she's talking about midwifery as part of a ritual practice dealing with medicine, but also dealing with the spirit of the children and a number of different things. For us, we're just not midwives, just, catching babies, so to speak. They're attuning to the spirit of the child as part of a ritual function in and of itself. That's a priestess type function in and of itself. You'll see different deities like Beth and Betsy around children and so forth, and Mesquinet and different ones. That has to do with midwifery. This is a priestly and priestessly function in and of itself. So sometimes those women who are catching the babies or, taking care of young babies and helping the young mother and so forth, they are seers themselves, and they can tell that this child is a seer because they're one of their colleagues. They have that kind of spirit. They know who their colleagues are. Their Nhoma have already informed them, or the abosom has already informed them. They're waiting for the baby to be born so they can eventually take them into their quote-unquote guild to, do that kind of work. Sometimes children are born with specific marks. Their birthmark is in the form that's connected, what we would say in Akan, an Adinkra symbol, one of the symbols you find on the Abramu gold weights, but specific symbols that mark them as this child has come in specifically to serve as a vessel for the community, for the abosom to operate through, for the Nhoma to operate through. As the child is growing up, they're very receptive. Sometimes they have out-of-body experiences and everything else. Sometimes they can tell you things that are happening. They start manifesting their capacity to see and project and feel and understand beyond the physical and all of that. So there's a number of different ways. But when we put culture back in place, then we will have people, of course, who are consistently going through their Nhoma shrines of their ancestresses and ancestors, dealing with their Kra and their abosom that governs their Kra. So when they have children, they will already be taking these things into consideration. They will be taking their children to the shrine. Their children will be born into the culture, just like we were not born into the culture, but our children will be born into the culture. And because of the ritual work that we've been doing and opening up our receptivity to the Nananoman Samafo and the abosom on a consistent basis, when the child comes through, we want to know what their function is. So through divinatory practice, we find out, we ask, and they will give us that information to let us know what's going on. So there's a number of different ways, and it varies by group. And here in North America, we have to reconstitute that, but it's based on fundamentally receptivity. We make ourselves receptive to the abosom, then we'll be able to attune to the child or the adult, because sometimes it doesn't, the abosom don't move to, capture the person until they become an adult. They allow them to grow up and function in society like everybody else, have the same experiences as everybody else does, and the same trials and same kinds of, anxieties that everybody else does, or sometimes even become very ill. And then they come to them, so they know what people are going through in the worst aspects of society. Then the abosom come to capture them, possess them, take them through this process, and now they understand what everybody in the society, how they're living, how they're functioning, what kinds of things can come up, and how to bring resolution. And they can empathize, but also bring that healing as well. So it's different for each person.
Yeah, it makes sense that it has to be revealed to you, and particularly for us here in North America, just through more consistent Nhoma ancestral communication. I just wonder if there was some kind of sign or something that a person knows, they're supposed to be a priest or priestess, but I understand your answer.
I know sometimes those signs will become sometimes they will become very vivid. So it really depends on the person, and depends on what their function is. Sometimes it's automatic from the time they're children, or sometimes, like I said, they will quote-unquote live a normal life, and they will be allowed to live a normal quote-unquote life just like everybody else, because Abo Solomon and Odumafo want them to experience everything that everybody else is going through. And then they capture them, and now they have the capacity to have that kind of insight into the everyday lives of everybody, but then they also have the capacity to bring the Abosin through and heal and so forth, and just makes them a more in-tune healer. So sometimes they don't know growing up, but then sometimes from the gate the children are shown and marked to be that, and those who are receptive within the family, the elders and eldresses, male and female, recognize who they are, recognize which ancestor or ancestress has returned, sometimes can tell you exactly which one it is, and then they prepare them from that point on. And they keep them purified, keep them focused, keep them away from lustful activity and malicious activity and all other kinds of nonsense, and train them up in that way because they know what's coming for them, and they need to prepare them and make them strong and keep them focused and purified on a consistent basis.
Yes, well, I hope that more priests and priestesses here in North America will be, revealed. That's for sure, especially in these times.
Oh, definitely. Just by virtue of the fact that, ancestral religion is resurging from an authentic foundation.
Right.
There are many people who were marked to be that, and they still are. And once they begin to re-engage their ancestral religious practice, they find that out, and they will be naturally moved in that direction to begin to purify themselves and begin to serve the community in that capacity. I think when they have children, their children will be born into that, but they are returning to that now. So there are many of them on deck right now. So that's coming. Good. Good.
Gracias.
Okay. Yeah, I said that. So we have, hold on 1 second, just a comment in the chat room regarding that specific point. So, comment in the chat room says, my mother told me I was born with a veil and I have had futuristic dreams and other spiritual experiences over time, but never had anything told to me by anyone that defined what I am. If I am an Akan spirit, I am connected to Adjua. I try to hear during ritual, but mostly I feel lost. So, now, check out the, we did an article, as well as one of the broadcasts we touched on it, a couple of the broadcasts we touched on it as well. The article, Samain Kom, and the 7, and then we also, even if you look also at the Aboa Nkwa page as well. So, in fact, let me put that in there real quick, the chat room. The Samain Kom and the 7 senses is one of the articles we have on the website. We'll just put the title in there. And the Aboa Nkwa page on the site. So, in Samain Kom and the 7 senses, we talk about the 7 spiritual senses. And one of the reasons we talked about that, of course, there are more than just 5 senses. You know about sight and smell and hearing and taste and touch and everything. But we also have the sense of balance. Of course, you can't function in the world without your sense of balance. If you don't have a sense of balance, you couldn't even sit in a chair, you would fall over. So that's critical to your proper functioning every moment of every day, your sense of balance. And then we have a sense of time, a sense of time which includes space consideration. On on the physical side, so those 7 senses, but then, and they're governed by the Abosom, they're governed the 7 days of the week as well. But we also have those same 7 senses, but the spiritual aspect. You have the capacity not just to see, which is one of your senses, but to see beyond the physical. So you're clairvoyant. You can see spirit, see Nhoma, see the Abosom. You have the capacity to hear, that's physical, but then you have the capacity to hear beyond the physical. You can hear ancestral spirits speak, discarnate spirits speak, hear the Abosom and so forth, clear audience. And then the same is true for the other 5, the clear gustance, which is the, sense of taste beyond the physical. Certain tastes manifest bitter or sweet or whatever when certain spirits come forward and you develop that scent. Clear alience, where certain smells, when a negative spirit comes forward, it's a, foul odor you smell all of a sudden. When a positive one comes forward, it's, natural smells you can tell, or even the sense that these ancestors and ancestresses used to wear, and they, flood you with that scent, and they are there, or their natural body had when they were alive, that manifests when they come into the room as a spirit and so forth, so you have the capacity to smell beyond the physical. So all the different senses, physical, have their spiritual manifestations as well. So sometimes we don't always contextualize what's taking place. You may not see something at the shrine or hear something at the shrine, but other things are taking place through these other spiritual senses that are actually directing you to what's actually happening, but you may not have contextualized the experience. Or they give you some information and you think you heard something, or they plant some thoughts in your head and you assume that they're your thoughts. Then later on in the day, when you're on your way to a certain area, you get the hunch to take a different direction. You take a different direction, you run across someone, or you run across some information or a sign, something that's actually confirming what your Nhoma planted in your head at the shrine. Then you see there's a direct connection between what you were given at the shrine and what you came in contact with, or were directed or pushed to come into contact with in the course of everyday life. When we talk about Aboa Nkwa, we're talking about the animal totems, the Achinegwa. They send ancestral animal totems on a consistent basis at specific junctures in your life to bring a message or to wake you up, rouse you up, snap you out of that coma to see what's going on. When you begin to look back over time and see at specific junctures in your life when certain animals kept showing up, or you were pushed into position to come across specific animals over and over, now you can begin to contextualize your experiences because you've been having them, but you may not have been contextualizing them. And once you do that, and that very often takes place, people say, I haven't been having any communication, but then when they begin to reassess the kinds of communications they've been receiving, they realize that not only have the Nhoma and Abosom been communicating on a consistent basis, but they've been communicating in specific patterns, certain kinds of people, certain kinds of animals on a consistent basis over a period of time, and they have left their marker, their signature on those communications on a consistent basis. I want to make sure. All right. Make sure we didn't. And let me know if that answers the concern, or if you've seen those specific pieces. So let me put that site. Okay, Yenya said that. I'm going to put this site on here real quick. Aboa Nkwa. And Aboa Nkwa is the ritual movement, sacred ritual movement of the physical body in the form of our sacred animal totem to align our bra, our ba, with our kra, our ka, align the divine living energy within us with the soul, the divine consciousness. So a specific ritual movement for exercise, but also stretching, toning, exercise, defense, offense, focus, and so forth. But we also talk about the Achinegwa, the animal totems, in detail on what their function is, and we did a broadcast on that as well. So we put that link in the chat room. All right. So there were a couple of other definitions we wanted to get to. So let me scroll back real quick in the Mojo working book. And in fact, let me quickly type that in the chat room as well so you can see. Okay, so it's Mojo, working, M-O-J-O, working without the G. That's the name of the book. Dr. Katrina Hazard. And then they also have on Facebook, they have a group. She has a group, the Old African American Hoodoo Tradition group on Facebook, which you can join as well. So that's just one of the few good references that we can recommend. All right. Okay, so here's another couple of things. So when they talk about the term trick, to trick somebody, now of course, English term trick is just, playing a trick on somebody, but another term for hoodoo used as a verb, sometimes they use it colloquially. To trick someone is to, quote unquote, hoodoo them or put medicine on them. Laying a trick means depositing a hoodoo amulet or powders or goofer pack so as to harm or change the behavior of the person targeted. The term trick has multiple meanings and is widely used in several contexts in African American culture, such as tricking or turning a trick, meaning prostitution, and trick bag, literally and figuratively referring to spiritual and physical connections to important people or beings and objects, the ability to make things happen, the tools, skill, and connections necessary to make things happen. And then the term trick bag related to that. Originally, this is a conjure pack or a root pack designed usually to bring harm or to ward off a certain individual. Also to mean spiritual and medicinal resources, as I have a few items in my trick bag that will help. But these are amulet pouches that would have medicines and other things in them. And when we originally are saying, well, what's in your quote-unquote bag of tricks, this is a hoodoo terminology. Or somebody says you got caught up in a trick bag. That's not just, a magician, some magic show, and they're talking about a bag of tricks or a trick bag or something like that. They're originally talking about getting caught up in that negative medicine or defensive medicine, offensive medicine or defensive medicine used to protect or attack. Now, related to that, possum bone reading, a divination system in which 7 or 9 opossum vertebrae are used to divine information for the client. This is one of the primary divination systems used on the plantation. Believed to be close to the ancestresses and ancestors, the opossum was chosen because it was often seen in the cemetery. Today, all the intermediary forces, known as for example, she mentions the New World, Orisha, are said to enjoy eating possum, and they are, quote-unquote, fed possum for a variety of purposes. Of course, this is in this region of the world, that possum, marsupial, and so forth, found, throughout North America. So, possum bone reading, utilizing these bones or casting bones for divination. Now, this is a convention shown by our Odumafo, our Abosom. Right here in North America, we developed this divinatory practice, born of our own blood source. And as the sister asked the question, people who are practicing hoodoo, they have children. If they are born to be priests, priestesses, seers, and so forth, the elders and eldresses can see that, and they train them up in that fashion, train them up in hoodoo. This is intergenerational, transcarnational transmission of culture that includes the Hoodoo-ma, Hoodoo woman, Odumafo class of priests and priestesses that are born into the culture. You have to be born into that. You must come into the world, on the continent, when people have divination done and they find out, you need to be initiated and so forth, all the divination is doing is alerting the person to what the person was born into. So it's not through divination that you're made a priest or there's a declaration and therefore you can become a priest because now you can do this. The divination is indicating to you, is showing you what you came into the world with. So you're not being given Orisha through ceremony. Orisha were assigned to you, or Abosom were assigned to you before you even came into the womb. All the divination is doing is confirming that reality and letting you see that externally, because you may not have been able to see it internally because of a lack of receptivity. So the same thing goes for us here. We are born into the tradition. Our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents sometimes are still practicing, but then you have other people who are not practicing anything. And you may be the only person practicing something. But you, at one point, were an ancestral spirit. You were assigned a bosom. You were assigned a specific function executing creation. You were assigned to a specific ancestral blood circle, have Nhoma connect to you, sent into the womb, and you were born, and you still have that function wired in your crop. Your Nhoma direct you towards information that helps you to regain that. They direct you towards establishing an ancestral shrine and going to the shrine on a consistent basis, so you can open up your receptivity and be guided by them more optimally. Open up your receptivity and be guided by the Abosom more optimally. And then you begin to reconstitute the culture that the people in your family have not been practicing because they've got involved in Christianity or Islam or other kinds of nonsense. You begin to reconstitute that practice. And as you begin to reconstitute that practice and generate the kind of field of energy based on work, that work of restoration, then you begin to draw other people into your orbit that are on the same frequency or are in reality subconsciously on the same frequency, but they may not know it consciously as of yet. You begin to draw such individuals, and you develop that kind of community, and then the children who are born in that community, or the children who are already part of that community, who are being reverted to ancestral religion, Echi-san, as we talked about in our broadcast, ancestral religious reversion, not conversion, but reversion. When they're being reverted back to ancestral culture and religion, then we're developing a community of people who have returned to the source, reestablishing healing practices, divinatory practices, based on who we came into the world to be. So this is what's taking place here. And many of our people are in that reconstitution phase as well. Okay, so there was a couple more we just wanted to go through real quick just to show that all these different divinatory practices and ritual practices and so forth, this is evident, even though people are using English terms and so forth, but the functions that they are executing within the community, within the family, these are priestessly functions. We've always had it. All right. Term hand, which is a name for a mojo bag. And when you look at the term mojo, a traditional African-American amulet, a genuine mojo or mojo bag can only be wrapped properly by an old traditional root worker. So when you look at the mojo bag, and then sometimes they're called a hand or a hand bag because you roll them by the hand and everything, and inside the bag is medicines and other ritual implements to affect a certain result. So that's the mojo. Let's read the one on hand, and then we're going to get into a little bit more detail on that. Hand, the name for a mojo bag, often referred to as a lucky hand. Hands come in different types, just as all mojos do. A mojo or hand prepared for luck in gambling is a gambling hand. Originally, a hand was made specifically for a client's needs. Each hand was different. A special type of hand was wrapped or prepared for left-handed people. The label hand is used because originally certain types of mojos were tailored to the size and shape of the client's left palm. So that's a particular type of mojo, but then mojo in and of itself is a traditional African-American amulet. That means a pouch very often, a container that contains medicines and other things that are implements that are used ritually to affect a specific result. Let me get to one more. Let's see if she has it in here. I don't remember if she had it in here. Oh, yes, she does. So the jack, another name for a type of hoodoo amulet or mojo bag. And then the jack ball, this term has two usages, one for the divination device, similar to the walking boy, in which a weighted mojo ball was suspended from a string about 18 to 20 inches long and used the same way as the walking boy. Other use for the term is to designate a type of amulet carried for protection and luck, as in I got my jack ball with me tonight, the African-American dance known as ballin'. The jack is a hoodoo reference. So let's get some more information on that directly from Akan culture. And there's a specific text, in fact, the 3-volume set is very hard to get, written by Georges Niangoran Bua, who is an Akan from the Baule Akan people in Ivory Coast. He made his transition a couple of years ago. He wrote a 3-volume set, The Akan World of Gold Weights. So he's talking about the Abramu, the gold weights, and so forth. Yeah, the images very well done. But there's a specific section we want to get to. Very often you see in those gold weights, there's the brass implements that are used to weigh gold dust, but then they're not just weights. They instead of just using weights to weigh the gold dust, they would use those weights and put symbols on those weights or make the weights into specific symbols, and they would be repositories, literally dictionaries of cultural information, encyclopedic information contained within those symbols. All the information associated with the symbol in those Abramu, those gold weights. So, but the key here is what we just talked about. So let me get to this page real quick to show you the direct connection. We were just talking about the Mojo bag, the hand bag, the jack ball, and so forth, all these different terms for these amulets and so forth. On one hand, Mojo, in Akan language, the term Moja means blood. And of course, blood is, your regular blood, but then blood is also used ritually as well, including menstrual blood can be used ritually for certain purposes, for offensive and defensive medicine. So we're talking about a Mojo hand, jack ball, handbag, all these different things. So in this particular book, he's talking about not only the gold weights, but also the specific container that the gold weights, these ritual implements, are contained within. So what he says is there are several different names in the tree language to indicate the cloth and parchment packet in which the ancestors and clan chiefs, as well as humbler individuals, used to store and preserve the apparatus and the figurines of various collections. In the Ivory Coast, the packet is called Ja. In Ghana, the same object is called Sana or Futuo. Ja is the contraction of the name of the soothsayer Jia. It was he who first, we know not when or where, conceived of the equipment appropriate for weighing gold. According to informants, the inhabitants of all Akan provinces came to ask for his help in estimating the mass value of their metal money. In this way, the name of the soothsayer became attached to the packet containing the weights and apparatus. Now they're talking about the specific gold weights. They're made out of brass. There are different weights. So when somebody has gold dust, you have a 1 gram weight, a 2 gram weight, a 3 gram weight, so you can determine. You have a scale, you have the weights, you put the gold dust on one side in the pan, and then you use the gold weight to measure. This 1 gram of gold dust, 2 grams, 3 grams, so you have a bunch of gold weights, all of different weights, made out of brass. However, instead of just little blocks that are just weights, our gold weights were formed in the form of animals or symbols, various proverbs. So we didn't just use them to weigh gold. We would pull them out of the bag to teach lessons. No different than you pull out a set of encyclopedias. You pull out your ja, your sacred bag that has all of the implements, including the gold weights and Bramu, and you lay these symbols out, and then you teach from these symbols just like you lay out a set of encyclopedias. Each one of those symbols was an encyclopedia of knowledge in and of itself. But then they're also connected to divination as well. So it's not just verbal teaching. So the bag in and of itself, called Ja in Ivory Coast, called Sana in Akan. Now, then it's named after the soothsayer, as they say, J.R. When he died, his precious packet The ja, which contained a certain quantity of gold, was inherited by a nephew. Recall that we mentioned in the past that very often gold is a portion, is an element in shrines to the abosom. Not only you have a shrine like a brass pan, ayowa for an abosom, in Akan culture, inside of that brass pan is a number of different implements. Very often gold is a component of the shrine of the abosom. So here in this hand bag, this ja, a quantity of gold was inherited, placed in that, but also the umbramu, the gold weights, with the sacred symbolism on them. They're matrices of energy in and of themselves. So they talk about his nephew, the soothsayer, inherited the bag, the packet. He fell heir to the Jea, the heritage of his uncle Jea. With time and linguistic usage, this word was contracted to Ja. Now, then he talks about, well, maybe that's just a story about that, but then, however, when you look at the Akan in Ghana, because he was talking about the Akan in Ivory Coast, and they call it the Ja, called the packet, the Ja, that holds the sacred symbols, sacred gold weights, the gold as well. And the packet was like a leather pouch wrapped up with cord, sealed with a cowrie shell, the same as a Mojo packet and so forth. But then that's the Akan in Ivory Coast. The Akan in Ghana, they call inheritance Edja Padie, the Ja goods or the heritage goods. So we're still talking about the Edja, that which is received from the father's side and so forth. So they call it the Ja in Ivory Coast. The Ivory Coast Akan, they call it the Sana in amongst the Ghanaian Akan. The term Sana is rooted in the term Nsa, and the term Nsa means hand. So this little packet made out of leather, wrapped up with a cord, sealed by a cowrie shell, containing the sacred implements that are used for divination and also used to teach and guide the community. It's called Sana, from the root Nsa, which means a hand, but it's also called Ja amongst the Ivory Coast Akan. It is a handbag or a Mojo hand, Sana, root Nsa, but it's also called a Ja. And then in English that becomes a Jack or a Jack or a Jack ball or a Jack, as we just saw in Hoodoo. The term Jack, another name for a type of Hoodoo amulet or Mojo bag. It's not a Jack. We were saying Ja, because that's how it's called in Akan and Ivory Coast, the Ja packet. Made out of leather with the cowrie shell, seal, and so forth, and carrying the sacred implements. We call it the Ja, D-J-A, Ja. And then we get over here and we say Ja or Jack, and they say, oh, they're saying Jack, and we started saying Jack and everything else. But then Jack ball, so it's a specific type of Hoodoo amulet or Mojo bag. And Jack ball, a term, has two usages, one for the divination device, similar to the walking boy, and then another one to designate the type of amulet carried for protection and so forth. So just like it's called Jack or Jack ball, it's really Ja from Akan, the Ivory Coast Akan. It is the Ja packet that carries the sacred implement for divination, for also business, but also for transferring knowledge to the community, intergeneration. The Ghanaian Akan call it a Sana from the root Nsa, which means hand, meaning it's a hand bag or a Mojo hand, literally. So when we come over here and we have amulets and we call them a Mojo or a hand, and here's your hand, in Akan, this bag is called an Nsana, which is a hand. So we're utilizing the same terms, dealing with the same kind of processes, unbroken from the Akan tradition directly to North America. And again, that is the Akan world of gold weights, that particular volume. That's in volume 1 of the Akan world of gold weights in that particular piece. All right. So we want to make sure we didn't miss anything in the chat room. Okay, and we know we started a little bit late, but it's almost 11 o'clock. It's only a couple of minutes left to 11. So we can end the broadcast here, but what we want to remind people of is coming up this weekend, North Carolina, Durham, North Carolina. We will be in Durham, North Carolina at the Vegan Flavor Cafe, 7 p.m. We'll be doing a presentation on Hoodoo people, the Akan Ancestral Religion, born of the blood circles of Afuraitkait people in North America. Of course, it is a free event open to Afuraitkait people only. We will be giving away a free copy of one of our books to everyone who attends the event. So please come out and share that information. We posted the information on Facebook and in our Ning site. So please check that out. And then we will be posting a notification for our upcoming event on the first full day of the winter solstice, the MAYN, which is actually, we're going to have that event on that Tuesday night. Benada, Abinada, not next week, but the following week on December 22nd from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. here in Washington, D.C. We'll also be giving away a free copy of one of our books at that event. So we'll be sending out a notification for that later tonight. But please share the information with regards to the Vegan Flavor Cafe event, Durham, North Carolina, this weekend, December 12th at 7 p.m. If you would like to assist in that process, any purchase of our books, one or more of our softcover books assist us in the process of being able to give away a free copy of one of our books to the community. And of course, to keep the event, all of our events are always free. And then we're also building up towards establishing our institution. We're still raising money for the funds for the institution, as well as we're going to be having a conference. We plan to have that in March, a conference on Nanasom, Afuraitkait Ancestral Religion, of course, from an authentic perspective, and have a number of different presenters there dealing with different aspects of ancestral religion from an authentic perspective. So we're working on all these different things, and some new publications coming out very soon as well. So, Yerase, we thank you for tuning in to the broadcast, and Yebeshia Bio, we will meet again. That's up.